Alright, so I just saw a preview for this new Disney movie that's coming out, produced by Blue Sky Studios, and it's called Epic. And I'm having a little bit of a hard time with it because it's supposed to be a children's adventure film, and it's clearly done with kind of the same style uh, as Tangled, and uh, it's from the same people who made Ice Age and Rio, because we know how much of a success Rio was after they bombarded us with ads for it and took over part of Fox's primetime broadcast one Sunday with Rio, 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 just driving you crazy, making you want to go see Rio. It was really, just insane. So I'm just looking at the imagery, and I'm reading the About section on epicthemovie.com. Now, first off, let me address something about the title. I hate the title. People want to use this term epic to say it's just a big story. Okay, fine. But most epics don't call themselves epics. You have the Epic of Gilgamesh, but it's just called Gilgamesh as well. And the Babylonians called it Gilgamesh. Odysseus's epic is called the Odyssey, taken from his name. And so forth. You have the Iliad, and you have all these other epic sagas that are going on where there are multiple stories and chapters and settings within the world, and so you create this very broad world. So right away, I think that the title is incredibly banal and derivative, and they could have picked a much better title. This is kind of representative of how Disney kind of controls things. They always want to go with a title that will draw the people in, instead of a title that will get people really interested in stuff. For instance, you could have actually called Tangled simply Rapunzel, and it would have been fine. Would have been perfectly fine. Nobody would have said bupkis about making a movie titled Rapunzel. Instead, they had to call it Tangled because, she has long hair, and it's a tangled tale, and there's all these ins and outs and intricacies to it. So the other thing to kind of point out is that Ice Age and Rio, if I remember correctly, were both produced by, Ice Age, I believe, was produced by DreamWorks, and Rio was produced by Fox Studios. I might be misremembering that. But the point is that we're having kind of a crossover here of different styles of storytelling. This one is apparently a far more wholesome thing. But why don't I read the About section, and I'll tell you kind of what it's about. What is Epic? Epic is a 3D CG adventure comedy that reveals a fantastical world unlike any other. From the creators of Ice Age and Rio, Epic tells the story of an ongoing battle between the forces of good, who keep the natural world alive, and the forces of evil, who wish to destroy it. When a teenage girl finds herself magically transported into this secret universe, she teams up with an elite band of warriors and a crew of comical, larger-than-life figures to save their world and ours. This film stars Beyonce Knowles, Colin Farrell, Josh Hutcherson, Christopher Waltz, and Amanda Seyfried. Learn all about Epic, play games, and read more about Epic characters as you get ready to do something. Gotta scroll down, sorry. As you get ready to experience this adventure in theaters May 24th. Anyway, so then we get into the characters. And I'm warning you right now, the site that they have for it is a little flash heavy, so you end up kind of waiting a minute if you have a slower or smaller computer, that kind of thing. I'm almost tempted to use the mobile version of the page. Most sites have these nowadays. Okay, so my problem right away is that they're basically making Tangled 2. The female character looks a lot like Rapunzel did at the end of Tangled, and the guy sounds a bit from the previews and everything. He seems a bit like that character. Okay, so voiced by Amanda Seyfried. It says MK after her name, so I don't know what that means. Anyway. Okay, so it says Seyfried has established herself as one of Hollywood's most captivating young leading actresses. That tells me nothing. Seyfried is best known for her starring role in the Universal Pictures hit film Mamma Mia. I hated Mamma Mia. I really hated Mamma Mia. I thought it did absolutely no justice to the ABBA music at all, which was the whole reason why I saw it. They were just using ABBA music so that they could use songs that people already knew to attract people, and then the story was completely derivative and uninteresting, and the acting left me completely, nonplussed. Anyway, so the film, directed by Phil Adelaide, was released in July. I don't need to know all that. That's. Okay, and she was in Universal's film adaptation of Les Miserables. Oh, I don't want to know about Seyfried. I want to know about the character. Tell me about the character. I know she's a teen girl. That's all we know about. She's been in a lot of things, okay. And nothing. I'm getting nothing. They're just telling me about the actress. Fun. Because that's really what I want to know about when I click on the characters section. Don't tell me at all about any of the actual characters. Tell me about the actors. Because I really care about the actors and their careers. And I can't just look that up on Wikipedia or IMDb or something. Okay, so Nimgalu, who looks like basically a four-armed yellow mole slug thing, is voiced by Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. That's something I didn't really care about. Why does Steven Tyler have to voice that character? He has a quite raspy and grating voice most of the time. And, oh look, Mub and Grub. Two snails. A long, skinny one, and a squat, fat one. One is voiced by Aziz Ansari, and the other is voiced by Chris O'Dowd. So, those are your comical characters, right there. Looks like there's also kind of an inventor grandma character. Let me just take a look here. I'll load it up. Jason Sudeikis plays Bomba. Basically an androgynous inventor type. How fun. They tell you absolutely nothing about the characters from the website in the section called Characters. Just their name and a picture of them. Okay, Bufo, voiced by Pitbull. I guess that... Yeah, it says... Pitbull has become a global superstar as both a recording and performing artist. He's a Miami native, so presumably, I'm guessing, okay, it says right here, his world tour sold out concerts in Latin America, Canada, and Europe, Japan, and Australia. And he's recording with Christina Aguilera. Whoop-de-doo. I don't need to know any of this stuff in order to actually want to see the movie. What I want to know about the movie is, what's the world like? What's the villain like? And they're not even telling me about the characters. So, I don't know a thing about the characters. I don't know a thing about the story. It's just epic. And the bad guy seems to be some kind of evil, dark wizard character who has a skinned bat head on his head. And the Bufo character's like a frog. And, they're just these characters. The women are all tall and slender and have petite figures and everything. And the big eyes and what's all it say? Okay, so I guess the dark character is General Ronin, and Nod is played by Josh Hutcherson. So I'm guessing Nod is probably the male character, the hero. Christopher Waltz is Mandrake. So I'm guessing that must be the squat guy that kind of is peeking out from over the bottom of the screen. Let me try and scroll down and maybe yep, I can see him now. Okay, he's clearly an Archer type character. I don't care about that. And then you have Mub and Grub and Bufo and Bomba and Nimgaloo. And Beyonce Knowles as Queen Tara, who is, oh look, they have her play a character whose skin is dark. So they made black actress black. So, this is an epic world where everyone's white except for the Queen. Alright. There's some photos. Let's take a look at those, if I can. Okay, that's loading. So that's part of the problem with trying to make these sites really over-the-top fancy with loading screens and everything, is that they go too fancy. They have too much stuff to load. It looks like basically this is kind of a micro world that these people exist in, because they're most of the characters that are human size compared to the heroine are like bugs and slugs and things, and then they ride on the backs of hummingbirds and crows, judging from the pictures. So it's basically pixie people, elf people, that are kind of in everything. And I'm taking a look at a couple of the pictures, and yeah, the bad guy, General Ronin, he's a general, so he must be evil. It just is really not surprising. It doesn't make me want to go see this particular movie. I don't think that it is necessarily going to be good for kids. It doesn't seem like it's really going to offer anything. It just looks like a big screw you to the audience. Here's your entertainment. We're not even going to bother giving it a name. Like, you could actually name it for the characters. One of the best fantasy stories I ever read as a kid was called Glim the Glorious, and it's not a new story either. But the illustrations were gorgeous and incredibly photorealistic. And they just called it Glim the Glorious, and it's a fantastic story about a gnome who helps Spider Queen or something like that, and he plays chess with other characters and everything, and saves the day and everything, and he's like a gnome wizard kind of character, but it doesn't play into the normal archetypes of like good and evil and everything, because you would think like the Spider Queen would be really evil and all that. So I always wondered why he would talk to the Spider Queen in a kind of friendly way. But that being said, they just call it epic instead of naming it from one of the characters or describing the adventure, like what's the MacGuffin that starts off the story. They don't tell you. In a lot of stories, they bother to tell you. The Lord of the Rings is about fighting against a great evil who has one ring to rule them all until he's defeated, and then trying to destroy the ring before that evil character can get it back. Ironically, the Lord of the Rings themselves, Sauron, does not go really and show himself. He's when you watch the flashback for Elrond, you get a little glimpse of Sauron, but only with his armor on, because without his armor on, he actually is a beautiful creature, because he's essentially a fallen angel. And of course, angels are, in some mythos supposed to be beautiful, and in other mythos they look like weird beasts or shadowy figures that are hard to recognize and things like that. So it's really kind of a mixed bag with the whole angels thing, but Sauron was supposed to be kind of a good, beautiful angel type character. Anyway, so what gets me about epic is, they have the characters look good, they have the bad guy be kind of beastie looking and sort of ugly, and he has a bat on his head because bats are evil. Since when are bats evil? Bats are really good creatures. They're good creatures to have around a lot of the time. They don't spread that much disease. Most of them just eat fruit and insects. In fact, a couple of places that I've lived, they've actually made homes for the bats and kept them because, first off, the guano is really good for fertilizer, but more importantly, they eat mosquitoes, and it keeps the mosquito population down, which then helps control the population of humans who get the mosquito spread diseases, because the mosquitoes do spread diseases like West Nile virus and malaria and all that kind of thing. So we don't want that kind of stuff spreading around, so we keep bats. Bats are really good creatures. They're part of the web of life, as we call it, where they play a role. And then owls eat the bats, and all other kinds of creatures eat the bats. The scavengers, bugs and bacteria and things will eat the bats when they die. Just because they're night dwelling and they creep us out a little bit does not mean that bats are bad. I myself don't care much for spiders, but at the same time, if it's a nice friendly little house spider, I don't have a problem with it. If it's the little tiny red bastards that bite you and make you swell up, those ones I mind. But it seems to be following very predictable paradigms. It's not really taking you on a journey that you necessarily ask to go on. And he's kind of getting shrunk down, sort of in the in the she's getting kind of shrunk down in the same way as Arthur from Arthur and the Minimoys was, or as they ended up calling it, uh, Arthur and the Invisibles. I think it was put out by DreamWorks or Fox Studios or something. It was CGI, and it didn't hit because there were other stories that were coming out at the time that people wanted to see. And really, I think part of the problem is that you have these studios that are competing for so much, and with Tangled, as the Nostalgia Chick pointed out, they tried to go with a more DreamWorks style of animation. And with this one, they're doing the same thing. They're giving the characters the same kind of edgy, up-to-no-good trouble look, where it's like, hey, we're going to challenge you. We're not going to just take stuff lying down. We're brave and that was kind of the direction they were going with Brave, and it looked like that one was going to be quite epic in itself. And it was going to be about a princess with bright red hair, and she was going to be doing something, but they gave it just a one-word title, and that was supposed to be fine. They did the same thing with Tangled, and now they're doing the same thing with Epic, because somehow that works for them as they see it. So they went with The Princess and the Frog, which was a really good title, and I thought it was a pretty good movie. It was a lot like what they were doing with a lot of other stories beforehand, but it was a very modern style with, at the same time, a very classic Disney style. I think they found a really good balance. I didn't understand why they said it flopped, because it came out to really good reviews. Critics loved it, and everyone I know who saw it loved it and thought it was just phenomenal. Way better than a lot of things that they had seen from Disney in a long time. But that being said, it's not so simple to just, come up with a formula that works for every story. Storytelling is as much about your audience. That's why in the 70s and 80s, Disney started to say, oh, well, there's kind of a darker, grittier feel to things, so let's make some of our stories a little bit darker and grittier. So they changed from their normal stories and made The Rescuers. They gave the parts to celebrity voices and everything, and made the story about a little girl who needed rescuing, and then with The Great Mouse Detective, they went kind of scary and creepy, but they went with, at the same time, a very classic story, a Sherlock Holmes kind of story, with Ratigan playing the part of Moriarty. It was great. I loved that story. I thought it was fantastic. They also made The Black Cauldron, which I saw, and I didn't think it was that bad. I don't know why it flopped, but it was not that bad a movie. It was kind of weird, sure, but it's a fantasy movie. So then you have Oliver and Company, which was kind of their return to, just flat-out musicals, and it was based on Oliver Twist. And I think that was just a little bit too much of a stretch, making Oliver Twist a cat. But they did try and make it kind of gritty, and they set it in New York instead of London. And they made, they made the different characters kind of work in their own way. They gave the voices to celebrities, and they did what they could there. I don't think it quite worked as well, but then after that, you saw the so-called Disney Renaissance that was actually brought about by Robert Zemeckis directing, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that actually was what brought about the Disney Renaissance, because they were able to kind of turn things around and start producing both really good live action and animated stuff. So then you had The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, all those movies that really hit, and you know, I saw them and I thought, it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. But they could have done way better. In retrospect, because there were places that they could have gone with other stories, like they did with The Hunchback of Notre Dame. They totally flopped on, and they went very dark, but not dark enough to where it was satisfyingly dark. And then with Pocahontas, they went way too light, and of course I forgot, they also made Aladdin, which was a big hit and spawned a television series and 2 sequel movies. So it wasn't awful, it was just different. But for the audiences at the time, it was actually a pleasant surprise. One of my favorites from back when Disney was kind of slogging along was when they made The Brave Little Toaster. Now, The Brave Little Toaster and The Lion King were originally supposed to be produced by Brad Bird and all them over at Pixar, but it didn't work. Disney didn't want to do it. They got rid of them. They fired all the people who wanted to do that, and they were just downsizing, and they were handling it too much like it was a business and not enough like it was an entertainment studio. They weren't willing to take some of the chances as they were before with the media of animation. And if they had, then they would have been a lot further along and kind of broken new ground. As it was, Pixar, as a division of LucasArts, was able to break new ground, and then, oh look, Disney now owns LucasArts, and oh look, they killed LucasArts. So I mean, all of that to kind of consider. Then Disney goes back to CGI and says, oh, now we're going to do lots of stuff with CGI. That's what we're going to do. And watching that, I'm like, watching like Tangled, I'm like, okay, well, this is a cute story, and they certainly had some decent characters and everything, but, looking back at where they could have been with this years ago, really pushing the medium of animation into the next level where it was going to go. They could have done that, and instead they didn't have the foresight. It was the 80s, Disney was having hard times, and they didn't want to waste money on something that might not work. So instead they went with formulaic stuff that didn't really hit with the crowd. So that brings us to now, where they have Epic, where it's incredibly formulaic, and it's done by the same people who did stuff that flopped. Ice Age at first was not a hit. They baited people with the scene with the Scrat, but then Tangled they did, and they baited people with the scene of the guy getting beat up by the different pieces of hair. And even though the hair wasn't in the movie, that scene with him getting beaten up with the hair, I should say, was not in the movie. It was made just for the trailer to get you interested, because it's like, oh, what happens? How does he get attacked by this girl after climbing in the thing? And it just kind of goes on from there. It's a very different, weird kind of story from what you're immediately expecting. and it goes in a very different direction, a much more DreamWorks direction, similar to Shrek, where it kind of mocks the different style of storytelling for fantasy stories. Now you get Epic, which is basically a rehashing of Arthur and the Minimoys, back when they were adapting every book that they could get their hands on into a movie. I thought, well, as soon as I saw the trailer, this does not. These trailers do not make me want to see it. It's like, oh, well, the girl meets a boy and he's kind of handsome and she's really pretty, and they go on an adventure through all this weird and wild fantasy world. I'm like, okay, so it's completely disconnected from reality, just like a lot of fantasy movies and a lot of CGI movies that we've seen. A Bug's Life and Ants were both really disconnected from our reality, and they were taking place in this bug world. Just a lot of fantasy stories like that take place in worlds that are kind of disconnected from our own sense of reality. So comes the question, what is really all that interesting about the movie Epic just from the first glance? And I can't really say anything to that effect. It's like when they talk about how they're going to make a sequel to Finding Nemo called Finding Dory, and it's going to be by Pixar and everything, and it's basically going to be capitalizing on the people who loved Finding Nemo and who love Ellen DeGeneres going and seeing the sequel. And I'm like, how is that going to work? Does she get lost? Obviously she's going to get lost, so then they're going to bring back Albert Brooks, and are they going to have Nemo go hunting for Dory? What exactly is going to be going on here? Are they going to bring back the turtles? Because I really like the turtles. Is it going to have the same style and storytelling? Is it going to be the same world? I mean, if they're going to do that, why not just make Incredibles 2 while they're at it? Because Incredibles was the best Pixar movie I have ever seen, and one of the best animated movies I've ever seen. That whole story was epic, and it talked about the journey of the person, and it talked about the journey of the family, and how they changed. So I thought that was one part where they could have coming up in the future where they could be doing things differently and better. But I'm not in charge of Disney. I'm not the one writing things. So, who am I? But that doesn't mean that they can just kind of pump out whatever schlock and expect us to just jump right at it like, starving dogs, because there are alternatives to Disney, and there are alternatives to DreamWorks and Fox Studios and all that kind of thing, where we don't need to see any of this. We don't need to go to the movies. I'm a movie fan, and I actually don't go to the movies. Last night I went to see Back to the Future, the first original movie, at a silver screen, classic kind of thing, a revival thing. It cost $5, which is cheaper than any movie ticket that I've ever been to anywhere. It hasn't cost $5 in years to go see one movie, when it costs $5 to just buy a copy of a movie, or less. There are used DVDs, there are discounted DVDs of movies that you haven't seen before, or movies that you haven't seen in a long time. Back to the Future was a perfect example. It was totally different watching it in the theater with other people. I was able to make jokes with my one friend, and we had a good time. the whole crowd cheered when George McFly slugged Biff. This is a very different story when it's with other people, and that's what you get out of seeing a film in a theater. All strangers in a darkened room are watching the same story and identifying with the characters, just as if it was on stage. And that is what brings the best out of a movie in the theaters. That's what made me a movie buff, was the whole theater experience is actually what you share with other people. It's not about buying popcorn and eating a hot dog and drinking a soda and eating snacks and everything, and sitting in a big comfy seat and having the experience like it's a ride. When I watched Avatar, I thought it was one of the worst pieces of schlock I ever saw, purely on the basis of it was so much like everything I'd seen before. When I saw Harry Potter 7 Part 2, I thought that, in the theater, I thought that it was okay. It was everything that was in the book minus some details, just like a lot of the Harry Potter stories. It had a nice ending. The 3D did absolutely nothing for me, or even for the telling of the story. I didn't need it, but it just became a question of like, why am I bothering to see this with people in a theater doing any of this? If you're going to just watch it at home or watch it on your computer, why not read a book? Because you get so much more out of a book, and it lasts longer, and it can be far more interesting. This is coming from someone who likes movies, who really, really likes movies, enjoys movies, and thinks that they're a wonderful thing to see and experience and talk about and share and relish in. But I don't go running around seeing every movie ever made, because I've seen a lot of movies already. Thanks to used DVDs and cable and everything, and online stuff, it's very easy to see movies now. As a result, that's why one of my favorite movies of the last decade or two is The Illusionist. One of the more recent favorites of mine, anyway. I have lots of favorites, but it just kind of raises the question. The Illusionist was an independent movie that was kind of out of the blue. It had a good ensemble cast of 4 main characters that everything kind of revolved around. It had a wonderful artistic way of storytelling that hasn't been done in a long time. A certain sense of humor and wonder and merriment, and at the same time recognized the beauty and darkness in the world. It had a wonderful sense of the period in which the story was to take place. It was based on a folk legend. It had wonderful elements to the storytelling that, whether you see it in a theater or you see it on your own, it's all kind of just its own thing. So I thought that was one of the better movies that I've ever seen just in the last few years. But that's me. With regards to Epic, I just don't get that sense. I get the sense that it's just like a lot of things that I've seen, that it's going to be like Tangled, that it's going to be like, other stories, but they give it the most derivative name. At first I thought, wait, didn't they already make that? No, that was Epic Movie, and that movie was terrible because it was just a parody and it wasn't very good, and everything was just mockery, and they just had comedic actors playing different weird parts and kind of loosely tying the story all together, but it didn't all work. So I didn't know what the heck was going on with that. But it just raises such a big question for me as to why I should go and see it. back in 2001, there was a film called The Watcher, and I think it starred Keanu Reeves. And this was between his filmings of The Matrix, after the success of The Matrix, but before they were done with the next Matrix movie. He did The Watcher, and nobody saw it. It completely bombed in the theater. Why make it? Why? There was really nothing about what it was about in the title. The Watcher, he watches things. Ooh. And when I did a review of it back then, I kind of asked the question, who will watch The Watcher? Nobody. So it just gets to be a bit of a question. What draws you to watch this movie? What goes into it that makes you interested in seeing it, really? There are two different kinds of stories. There's character-driven and plot-driven. And usually the plot-driven ones have to have some compelling characters in order to help drive the plot. And the character-driven ones have to have an interesting storyline and plot in order to help make their actions convincing, so that you're actually like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see where this is going. This is going to be good. I want to see how these characters play it out, see how it works out for them. Contrast that with plot-driven, where you have good characters, you really want to find out what happens. Perfect example would be the difference between Hot Fuzz and Run Fat Boy Run. Both these films were produced in Britain with great casts. Both starred Simon Pegg. In the case of Run Fat Boy Run, it's a plot-driven story, but there are great characters that you meet along the way that help make you want to find out more and find out what happens, because it doesn't seem like everything's going to play out. The characters are discouraged. The characters are troubled. They are facing adversity and pain. Now contrast that with Hot Fuzz, and you have specific characters that are driving the story, but the plot is also integral to it, because it's how they play out in the plot that makes the story. And then what they do in the context of it, where these characters are relatively, mundane, but the events of the plot are so absurd that it's funny, it's over the top, it's extreme. That is night and day contrast. But at the same time, both are comedies, both have a certain amount of grittiness to them, and of course, like I said, both star Simon Pegg. One was written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, that's Hot Fuzz. The other was written by Michael Ian Black of The State and of Stella and other comedy efforts. So, this is something where it's important to look at this stuff. It's important to say, well, what is driving this story? So with Epic, I don't get a sense that it's especially plot-driven, so then it must be about the characters, because that's what they're highlighting. If it's about the plot, then they would tell us about the plot. They would tell us about what the MacGuffin is for the plot. If it was about the characters, they would tell us more about the characters. Star Wars, for instance, is both plot-driven and character-driven in a lot of ways. And that's kind of what makes it epic. So, what we get as a result is a story that's very compelling, and you want to find out everything about it. And you want to explore this other world of Star Wars where they have all this stuff going on. Star Trek, same kind of thing. You have a plot of the week that's happening for the story, but you have the established characters, the established setting and ground rules that kind of drive the story along, but the plot is also important. And with that layering, you get something that's a lot more compelling to find out about. So, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.